The boring history for sleep. The strange hygiene. Rituals of Ancient Persia. Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the world of Ancient Persia, into marble chambers, humming with incense, where kings bathe in silence and servants glide by with gold-handled brushes and bowls of sacred foam. You're not watching from afar. You're in the steam towel around your waist, blinking through perfumed mist as a eunuch points to the royal basin and nods. Welcome to the cleansing rituals of a civilization that took bathing far more seriously than you take your Monday morning shower. Here's the twist, though. You probably wouldn't survive this. First, the water's not always warm. Second, those soaps. They're made of things like burnt plant, ash, fermented goat tallow, and sometimes crushed minerals that may or may not stain your fingernails blue for life. Blue, but mostly, it's the sheer pressure to get it right, the order of application, the chants, the scrubbing intensity. Imagine your morning routine being evaluated by a panel of temple officials. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world you're tuning in from. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin in the royal bathing chamber of Darius the Great, the scent of cedar oil already clinging to your skin. The bathhouse is quiet, except for the soft splash of servants refilling basins from terracotta jugs. The floor is made of imported stone, each tile inscribed with a protective blessing. You notice that the air smells like wild thyme and wood smoke, a blend chosen not just for fragrance, but for its supposed ability to elevate the soul during rinsing. Royal hygiene wasn't about cleanliness alone. It was a form of spiritual discipline. Persian elites believed that the outer body reflected inner purity. So scrubbing yourself properly meant aligning your soul with divine order. This idea came straight from Zoroastrian theology, where cleanliness was considered a cosmic necessity, not just a bodily perk. The royal attendants hand you something that looks like a sponge, but feels more like sandpaper. It's a scrubber made of boiled palm fibers. A bowl of viscous, amber-colored soap follows. You dip your hands in, and it's warm. The soap, a mix of sesame oil, potash, and wild herb extract, is slippery and pungent. As you work it into your arms, a nearby servant starts humming in a low, rhythmic tone. This apparently is a bathing chant. You try joining in. He gives you a polite side eye. You stop. Across the chamber, a eunuch kneels beside the king, gently massaging lather into his feet with a flat wooden tool that looks suspiciously like a small paddle. It's not just scrubbing, it's a sequence. First the right side, then the left. Always finish at the heart, and always rinse with water. Fetched at dawn, anything later in the day is considered spiritually stale. Historians still argue whether this ritual bathing was a daily occurrence or reserved for special ceremonies. Some say kings bathed before important decisions as a way to cleanse distraction. Others think it happened only before feasts or public appearances. What's certain is that these baths weren't solo affairs. Your every movement was observed, corrected, sometimes praised in soft tones, like a very awkward spa visit crossed with a school recital. And it wasn't just soap. After the main wash, attendants would apply a layer of oil infused with myrrh and saffron. The oil wasn't rinsed. It was rubbed in slowly with a tool called a tara, shaped like a bent spoon. The resulting sheen wasn't just beautiful, it was seen as a sign of celestial favor. The shinier the skin, the more aligned your spirit. Maybe. There's even a quirky tidbit recorded in a 9th century commentary. A courtier once accused his rival of using foreign soap that caused excessive lather, a vanity unbecoming of a true Persian. That rival was demoted 3 days later. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe suds were serious business. And don't forget the towel. Royal towels were sun-bleached cotton, stitched with silver thread, and scented with crushed rose petals stored in clay urns. You wrap one around your shoulders, and it clings like a warm whisper. But you're not done. Before you leave, a servant leads you to a small alcove where your feet are dusted with powdered sandalwood. Why? Because your feet touch the ground, and the ground is full of lies and filth, according to one popular saying of the time. You smile awkwardly and let him brush your soles. As you step out into the courtyard, skin gleaming, you hear another chant starting in the distance. Another noble has entered. Another bath begins. For the ancient Persians, there was always something to cleanse. You shuffle forward now, freshly scrubbed and glowing, but before your skin has even dried, someone is already dabbing oil beneath your nose. It's sticky, sweet, oddly peppery. You flinch instinctively, about to sneeze, but the attendant raises an eyebrow as if to say, "Don't you dare." This is not a prank. This is protocol. You're in the palace's scenting chamber, an unassuming corner tucked behind the main bath, where hygiene took a sharp turn from soap to smell. And in ancient Persia, the nose wasn't just for breathing. It was a battleground of purity, pride, and perfume. Scent, after all, was believed to influence mood health and spiritual alignment. a foul odor, evidence of moral decay, a sweet one, proof you were on good terms with Ahura Mazda, the benevolent god of Zoroastrianism. So now you're learning the art of nasal hygiene, ancient style. First, there are the beard combs. Crafted from sandalwood or ivory, they're narrow, delicate, and surprise-soaked in essential oils. Combing your beard wasn't just about neatness. It was to help diffuse scent every time you moved your face. Some nobles kept small bronze scent boxes hidden inside their beards like aromatic surprise grenades. If your beard didn't smell of cardamom clove or mint, were you even trying? Then there are nostril plugs. Yes, you heard that right. Tiny sponge-like inserts made of linen soaked in rose water or wine vinegar. Some were worn for health-filtering dust and alleged evil vapors. Others were worn to mask the less-than-pleasant odors of cities, markets, or traveling soldiers. Historians still argue whether these were daily accessories or just used during rituals or disease outbreaks, but records do confirm they were a thing, and a rather fashionable one at that. One poet even praised a lover's scented silence, likely referencing these perfumed barriers. And it wasn't just the wealthy. Scented handkerchiefs were everywhere. Some priests would wave them slowly while praying both to keep rhythm and to ward off evil smells. Many homes hung sprigs of thyme or lavender over doorways to purify the air with every breeze. Your average shopkeeper might carry a pouch of crushed cinnamon in his sleeve, just in case he needed to freshen his armpit mid-sale. You walk past an incense brazier now. The smoke is thick, but not suffocating, flavored with dried orange peel, pine sap, and something musky you can't quite place. The man tending it wears gloves and seems to be mouthing a prayer. You ask why? Because every scent rises to the heavens, he murmurs, and we don't send dirty messages to the gods. It sounds ridiculous. It also makes perfect sense here. The Persians even had rules for scent layering. Too many conflicting fragrances could lead to nose confusion. Yes, that's an actual term, lifted from an old Zoroastrian text. So they organized smells into categories: hot, cool earth, and sky. If your underarm balm was hot and spicy, your beard oil should be floral and cool. Balance was key. Unbalanced smell, spiritually off balance. You're handed a tiny jar now, red clay sealed with wax. Inside is something that looks like brown jam. It's a Persian balm made from ground date, pits, wild honey, and resin. You're told to rub it behind your ears to soften dreams. You do it. It tingles. You try not to touch your face afterward. This obsession with scent even extended to animals. Horses were brushed with rosemary water. Hunting dogs wore collars infused with marjoram. Even camels got the occasional spritz of saffron, especially before ceremonial parades. A well-scented caravan was seen as a reflection of a disciplined household. One Persian satirist joked that a man who couldn't perfume his donkey clearly couldn't lead a family. But perhaps the most telling detail of all, the smell inspectors. Yes, palace officials who could reportedly detect bad hygiene at a dozen paces. These men, selected for their allegedly superior noses, would walk quietly through court assemblies. One sour whiff, and you'd be pulled aside for re-scenting. Were they real, maybe? Or maybe just an effective rumor, like high school hall monitors with superpowers? As you leave the chamber, a breeze brushes your face. You smell like a dessert tray. Not bad, you think, but also not subtle. You pass a group of children playing with fragrant herbs. They're pretending to be royal noses, the highest compliment for a young Persian. It hits you to be clean here is not just to be washed. It's to carry an invisible halo of scent that says, I belong. I know who I am, and I remembered to anoint behind my ears. And you remembered. Sort of. One nostril smells like rosewater. The other, faintly like smoked fish. You'll get better. You're up before dawn now. Not that you slept much, what with the heady perfume clinging to your nostrils, and the faint tingle of that dream-softening balm behind your ears. Your host, a minor noble, with an impressively waxed mustache and an urgent sense of morning ceremony, has summoned you for grooming. Not breakfast, not prayer. Grooming. Before you can even yawn, someone's already thrust a small twig into your hand. It's a miswak cut from the arak tree, still damp with sap, and frayed on one end, like a rustic toothbrush. No bristles, no paste, no battery-powered hum. Just you and a stick. And let's be honest, you're skeptical. But your host beams with pride. The prophet Zoroaster himself valued clean breath, he says, holding up his own twig like it's a scepter. Then he proceeds to scrape at his molars while humming a tune that sounds suspiciously like a lullaby. So you follow along, trying not to gag as the bitter bark hits your tongue. It tastes like licorice that went to war. Still, you can't deny it. Your teeth do feel a little cleaner afterward. Maybe it's the abrasiveness. Maybe it's the sense of achievement. Maybe it's the peer pressure. After the miswak comes a cinnamon paste. This one's not applied with a brush, but with the fingertip of a servant who probably has better things to do. He scoops a pea-sized blob from a ceramic pot, dabs it gently on your tongue, and gestures for you to swish like a peacock, whatever that means. The taste is strong, spicy, and slightly sweet. You feel like a living bakery. You try to ask what's in it. The answer includes cloves, pomegranate rind, powdered date seeds, and something described only as dragon's tears. You don't press further. Historians still argue whether this tongue paste was common or reserved for upper classes. Some ancient medical texts suggest it had antiseptic properties. Others say it was more about courtly manners. After all, if your breath offended a noble, that could be seen as an act of social aggression. Imagine halitosis as treason. Next, you're handed something that looks like a feather dipped in oil. It's a tongue scraper, not for brushing, but for polishing. You're told to drag it across your tongue until it sings. You give it a try. It doesn't sing, but your gag reflex definitely wakes up. Still, there's a logic to it. In Zoroastrianism, the mouth is sacred. It speaks prayers, receives sacred bread, and should never be tarnished by decay or arrogance. This is why even minor ailments, like chapped lips, were treated with reverence. You see a young boy beside you dabbing rose water on a cold sore while muttering what sounds like a spell. He nods to you solemnly. You nod back. Then the ears. Yes, ears. Your host shows you a pair of gold tweezers used for plucking ear hair. A clean ear is a listening ear, he says. You pretend to agree while trying not to flinch. Next, he massages his earlobes with almond oil, explaining it's for calm dreams and proper judgment. Whether that's real or poetic is unclear, but it smells nice, and you're too sleepy to resist. You begin to realize just how involved Persian grooming was. It wasn't just a 5-minute mirror check. It was an entire ritual, layered with theology, astrology, and social signaling. Beard slightly crooked. You're unstable. Nails too long. You're vain. Elbows dry. You may be harboring deceit. Each body part was a tiny resume, subtly judged, spiritually assessed. There's even a scroll laid out beside your host's grooming basin. On it, a handwritten chart aligning grooming routines with planetary hours. Apparently, you're brushing your teeth during a Mars hour, which means you should avoid spicy scents, angry thoughts, and strangely goats. Again, you don't. The final step of the morning routine is fragrance layering, not to be confused with yesterday's bath scents. These are lighter, designed to carry throughout the day. You're given a delicate puff of jasmine mist under each armpit and a small dab of frankincense oil at your temples. To protect your words, the attendant whispers, "You hope it works." And just as you're beginning to think it's over, Your host lights a small coil of incense near your feet and bows his head. You copy him, not quite sure what you're honoring. Maybe the gods. Maybe your resolve. Maybe the fact that you survived Persian dental hygiene without weeping. As you step outside into the morning sun, every inch of you feels attended to even your earlobes. You pass a street vendor selling bundles of mint twigs and beeswax tooth polish. A woman haggles over a jar labeled breath balm. You smile, aware your own breath now smells like a cinnamon orchard. A child points at you and whispers something to her mother. You catch the word handsome, or maybe it was hazardous. Either way, your smile stays wide. You're now standing barefoot on cold stone steps outside a fire temple, squinting into the morning haze with your nostrils still tingling from too much cinnamon paste. The temple is small, but imposing, with thick walls made of baked mud, brick, and whitewashed stone. You can hear the faint crackle of a sacred flame inside a fire that, according to your guide, hasn't gone out in decades, or centuries, or maybe never, depending on which priest you ask. You're here to witness something vital to Persian hygiene, not just bodily, but spiritual. This is where Zoroastrian purity laws really flex their muscles. You thought beard oil was serious business. Try being spiritually flammable. Before you're allowed inside, a young acolyte appears and stops you with a gentle wave of the hand. You must wash first, he says, handing you a small clay jug and a cotton cloth. You have city dust on your soul. It's not an insult. It's doctrine. In Zoroastrianism, nasu pollution isn't just physical filth. It's a spiritual condition, clinging invisibly to bodies, hands, and even thoughts. And purifying yourself isn't optional. It's cosmic etiquette. So you trudge over to a low basin carved into a stone ledge near the temple entrance. You watch others do it first. The ritual is precise. Wash your right hand 3 times, then your left. Then splash water behind each ear as if inviting clarity to enter. There's a quiet rhythm to it, almost meditative. You follow along the water, surprisingly cool. The cloth soaked in rose water is used to pat, not wipe the eyes and mouth. This, you're told, is to greet truth cleanly. Once inside, shoes off, you're struck by the stillness. A large urn holds the sacred fire, its flames dancing with eerie restraint. The priest doesn't speak. Instead, he gestures silently, pointing you toward a small, raised platform where devotees stand in utter stillness, eyes closed, faces serene. Then the purification begins. It's not bathing exactly, it's cleansing in a broader sense. You watch as the worshippers sprinkle a fine, white powder onto their palms. It's called gomez, made from powdered minerals and dried petals. They rub it slowly between their fingers, then fling it toward the fire, not into it, but around it, as if drawing an invisible boundary between the sacred and the profane. One elderly man recites a prayer while tracing a spiral pattern on his chest with oil. His hands never touch his skin directly, always through cloth, always clockwise. Historians still argue whether these precise gestures were recorded accurately or filtered through later traditions. Some claim they were essential to temple worship. Others believe they evolved as community-specific practices. What's certain is that no fire temple ever smelled bad. Between the sandalwood incense flower oils and lemon leaf washings, you could nap in one and dream only of spring. Acolytes, young and sharp-eyed, walk around with bundles of herbs and jugs of water. One boy dabs the floor with vinegar and murmurs what sounds like a lullaby. He explains that even the stones deserve to be clean before touching sacred feet. You're handed a ribbon of linen soaked in jasmine tea. For your forehead, the priest says, to keep your mind pure while you witness the light. You press it on, and the scent, sweet citrusy floral, seeps into your skin. Purification here isn't just about washing dirt. It's about realigning with cosmic order. According to the Vendidad, one of Zoroastrianism's oldest texts, impurity spreads like smoke. So every act of cleansing is a small flame of resistance. Your wet fingers, your oil-anointed temples, your freshly brushed teeth, all part of a bigger battle between order and chaos. And then someone sneezes. Everyone freezes. The priest bows his head solemnly and hands the offender a small pouch. Inside, mint leaves and dried rose petals. The man chews obediently, then exits, muttering apologies. Sneeze in the presence of fire, your host whispers, and you must cleanse your breath again. A bit harsh, maybe. But in ancient Persia, every breath mattered. Every act of purification was a vote for harmony. You linger in the temple's cool shadows for a while longer, watching the interplay of scent, sound, and silence. No one seems rushed. No one seems burdened. They simply cleanse, breathe, and begin again. And as you step back out into the sunlit courtyard, you realize that in a world without antibacterial soap or electric showers, these rituals weren't just quaint habits. They were sophisticated systems, delicate, intentional, mysteriously calming. You feel calmer too. Maybe it's the jasmine. Maybe it's the fire. Maybe it's the weird sense that you've just washed your existence. You've barely left the temple courtyard when another rule is whispered your way this time by a wide-eyed boy carrying 2 clay jugs and walking with exaggerated care. Don't touch the water. Twice, he warns. It's dead after the first use. You blink, confused. But he's already turned the corner, sloshing water rhythmically with each cautious step. Welcome to another layer of Persian hygiene, the curious taboo against reusing water. In ancient Zoroastrian practice, water wasn't just a physical element. It was alive, a sacred force, one that could be killed by impurity. Washing your hands, that water is now polluted. Rinse your face again with it, and you've just undone all the cleansing. This idea wasn't metaphorical. It had practical implications. Entire households developed complex washing routines to ensure that no one reused what another had touched. Basins had multiple chambers. Jugs were poured in single, continuous streams, and anything that dripped back into the main supply was discarded or buried in the earth. You enter a small family compound, now joining the morning routine. A woman in a bright turquoise headscarf kneels beside a ceramic washstand. She pours water over her daughter's hands, catching the runoff in a narrow trench carved into the floor. That water flows directly into a clay-lined channel leading to the garden, not back into the basin. This way, she says, the trees take the sin. You nod slowly, unsure whether you're impressed or a little unnerved. Either way, the daughter's hands are gleaming, and the roses nearby smell spectacular. Inside the house, water storage is serious business. There are jugs for drinking, jugs for cleaning, and jugs for ritual only. One man shows you a jug painted with stars and crescents used solely for full moon washings, when the water is said to sing better to the spirit. You ask what that means. He just winks. Historians still debate whether this practice was universally followed or exaggerated by later religious authorities. Some scholars argue that only temple-going elites worried about water purity to this degree. Others suggest that even humble farmers respected these taboos, especially during festivals or holy days. But one thing's clear: water was sacred, and touching it came with responsibilities. In some texts, using dead water was considered worse than skipping cleansing altogether. You're told the story of a merchant who reused water from a horse trough to wash his face before prayer. He got a rash. The moral, apparently, was don't cross the elements. Even hand washing had protocols. You couldn't just plunge your fingers into a bowl. You had to pour, never dip. You had to recite a short verse, usually a 2-line prayer, before the water touched your skin. and you were encouraged to dry your hands using air or sun, not a cloth, because linen retained the memory of filth. At least, so said the elders. You find yourself growing oddly self-conscious about your hydration habits. That jug you drank from earlier, was it for drinking only? Was it possibly sin-tainted? Your host sees your hesitation and chuckles. "You'll be fine," he says, handing you a fresh cup. It's sunrise poured, still holy. In the marketplace, you see public water stations. Each one is tended by a local youth, usually barefoot and cheerful, holding a ladle on a stick. They pour water directly into people's cupped hands or mouths, never into another vessel. Wait, because any container might carry impurity. Better to drink like a bird than risk upsetting the divine plumbing. Even laundry was touched by these ideas. Washing clothes required fresh water always. Used rinse water was immediately poured into the soil. No reusing, no wringing into buckets. You see a row of tunics drying on a line beside a slow-dripping irrigation ditch. Each one was scrubbed using soap root, a foamy plant extract, and dried facing east toward the rising sun. One woman shows you a small amulet sewn into the hem of her robe. "It keeps my cloth clean," she whispers. You ask if it's magical. "No," she grins. "It's cedar bark." But that's close enough. You're beginning to grasp that Persian hygiene was never about laziness or luxury. It was about invisible ethics. The idea that every drop, every act of rinsing had consequences. Ritual, social, even cosmic. The water you use today shapes the purity of your thoughts tomorrow. And as you step outside the compound, a thin splash of well water catches your foot. You freeze. A little girl points at your sandal and says, "Oops, dead water." You sigh and walk around the puddle. You've left the city now, riding slowly beside a dusty caravan, winding its way through the desert plains. The sun is already sharp, rising over the horizon like a molten coin. And your skin, despite its earlier oil treatments, is beginning to itch with the slow, relentless cling of sand and sweat. But as the day stretches on, you notice something peculiar. No one seems to smell. Not the merchants, not the camels, not even the teenage boy riding a goat-drawn cart with a sack of onions tied to his hip. Everyone's dusty, yes, but fragrant. Still somehow, yes. Welcome to the art of desert cleansing Persian style. You've heard of bathing in rivers, in sacred water, in citrus and oils. But this is your first encounter with the so-called sand showers, an ingenious hygiene. Workaround developed for regions where water was rare, precious, and often sacred. You stop beside a group of women squatting near a low dune, their hands moving methodically through piles of fine, warm sand. They aren't digging. They're scrubbing. One invites you over and hands you a satchel. Inside, dry rose petals, ground walnut husk, and fine, pale ash. You take a handful and rub it against your forearm, and to your surprise, it works. The sand pulls away sweat. The walnut shell exfoliates. The ash seems to neutralize odor. You're not wet, but you're definitely cleaner. This is how desert brides stay fresh. One woman jokes, offering you a chunk of resin to chew on. Its sticky tastes, faintly of pine sap and lemon, and apparently keeps the mouth clean for hours. Water is for crops, she adds. We dust ourselves like figs. Historians still argue how widespread these practices were. Some claim they were strictly nomadic. Others suggest even urban households used dry scrubs during drought seasons. What's clear is that Persians understood cleanliness didn't require moisture. It required friction and the right mix of local herbs. You're led to a tent with smoke billowing gently from its flaps. Inside, a makeshift steam chamber has been created using hot stones and damp cloths soaked in myrtle oil. It's not quite a sauna. It's more like sitting inside a herbal teapot. You crouch beside a sweating merchant who's dabbing his arms with a rag dipped in camphor water. Too much oil, and the sun will fry you, he explains, patting his chest dry with a bundle of sage leaves. Too much dust, and the gods will think you've stopped trying. There's a logic to the rhythm of cleansing here. In the morning, sand rubs and herbal chewing. At midday, steam tents and dry oils. At dusk, gentle dustings with aromatic powders, usually made from powdered flowers, cinnamon, or crushed almond skin. The goal isn't to erase sweat entirely. It's to balance it, to make it harmonious, not offensive. Even the camels get their due. You spot a handler rubbing their necks with what looks like spiced flour. Keeps flies off and spirits in, he says, winking. As the caravan settles under an awning for rest, you see bundles of dried herbs hung from each wagon: axle, lavender, thyme, basil, meant to ward off bad luck and bad smells. Travelers rub these into their scarves before wrapping them around their heads. You follow suit and immediately feel more composed, or at least more like you know what you're doing. Children nearby toss handfuls of sand onto one another, laughing and shrieking. It's not punishment, it's play. You realize as you watch their parents gently patting clean sand into their hair that this isn't some last resort ritual. It's a cultural art form, precise, resourceful, oddly soothing. You lie back now, watching the thin ripples of heat rise into the sky. Someone passes you a thin wooden comb with dried fig bark lacquered into the handle. For scalp cleansing, they whisper. You give it a try. It's scratchy. It works. No water touched your skin today, yet you feel refreshed, lighter even. Maybe it's the rose petal dust. Maybe it's the lemon resin. Maybe it's the simple wisdom of rubbing yourself with things that grow beside you. Or maybe it's that here, in the heart of the desert, the Persians found a way to wash without washing, turning dryness itself into an act of care. The sun is lower now, casting a coppery hue across the gravel paths as you walk alongside a column of soldiers preparing for the evening watch. Helmets off, boots loosened, they kneel in formation, not to fight, but to shave. Yes, shave. You expect weapons drills, or rations, maybe strategy talk, but instead, the officer calls out the day's number in the Zoroastrian calendar, and the men respond with a synchronized rustle of razor kits. It's the 15th, one soldier mutters, splashing his cheeks with a splash of oil. You don't skip the 15th. Welcome to the 30-day beard plan. In ancient Persia, facial hair was not only a fashion statement, but a calendar, a symbol, and oddly enough, a theological compass. Certain days were beard days, sacred moments in the month when shaving was required. Other days demanded stubble, even full beards. To disobey was to court divine irritation, or worse, social embarrassment. You crouch beside a young recruit who's struggling with a dull blade. His commanding officer watches over him like a stern older brother. Short on a waxing moon, he recites long on a waning one, unless it's day 9. Never shave on day 9. You blink. Why? Because that's the day of Rashnu, the god of truth. You face him honestly, hair and all. Historians still debate the origins of these beard taboos. Some suggest it comes from astrology. Others say it stems from deeper Zoroastrian principles about order and chaos. Either way, ancient Persian grooming guides were bizarrely specific. One 4th century manual allegedly includes a chart on mustache symmetry and divine favor. Another warns that trimming above the lip while angry can result in shaky judgment for 5 days. You're handed a copper razor. It's heavy, shaped like a flattened fish, and has a tiny inscription that reads, "Honesty begins at the chin." You try to shave a patch of your cheek, only to nick it slightly. A nearby soldier hands you a salve made of thyme oil and goat's milk. You're not the first foreigner to bleed for cleanliness, he jokes. After shaving, the men anoint their faces with a balm made of date seed oil and ground chamomile. It's not just about looking sharp. It's believed to calm aggression and seal the skin with calm. You're beginning to understand that Persian hygiene wasn't just reactive, it was predictive. Clean the body in specific ways on specific days, and your week will flow more harmoniously. You ask what happens if someone forgets to follow the routine. Depends on who notices, the officer says. If it's your commander, you get latrine duty. If it's the gods, well, we burn some mint and apologize. One of the older veterans tells a story of a general who shaved his beard on the 17th, the day of Ardvi Sura, the goddess of the sacred river. And the next day, his camel caravan got stuck in the mud for 3 days. Coincidence? The whole platoon still refuses to shave on the 17th. And then there's the ceremonial beard combing. At sunset, the soldiers form a circle, sit cross-legged, and begin slowly combing their beards or chins, whether clean-shaven or full, while reciting a short verse that roughly translates to, "As my face is made plain, may my thoughts be also." You join in miming the motions, with your hand feeling surprisingly centered. There's something meditative about it. In this moment, you're not in a foreign land, fumbling through rituals. You're just a person under a quiet sky, running a comb through your thoughts. As twilight falls, the soldiers light a small fire, not for warmth, but to burn the beard trimmings. Hair carries memory, someone murmurs. We don't leave it lying around. The scent of singed keratin and sandalwood rises gently into the evening air, and you, once baffled by these rhythms, now find yourself smoothing the edges of your own sideburns, wondering which day of the calendar it is, and whether your stubble has somehow offended a star. You wake the next morning to the sound of heated whispers outside your tent. A group of women, gathered near a woven reed screen, are arguing softly about the moon, or rather, the implications of the moon. One points upward, frowning. Another rubs her hands with vinegar. A third simply mutters, "It's not a day for water." You step closer, only to be gently shooed back by a stern older woman with a bowl of saffron petals. "Not your business, traveler," she says, not unkindly. "This is a women's morning. Welcome to one of ancient Persia's more elusive and controversial hygienic customs, lunar tide cleansing rules for women. In public, such things are spoken of only in metaphors. The moon is heavy, someone might say. Or, she walks the shadow path today. But privately, there were detailed protocols. On specific days tied to lunar phases, especially during menstruation, bathing was forbidden, or at least heavily restricted for women. not because of shame, because of cosmic alignment. The idea was that during these moon-touched periods, a woman's spiritual energy was too volatile to interact with sacred water. You watch as one woman carefully braids her hair, using strands dipped in dry lavender oil, an alternative form of cleansing said to soften the body without stirring the waters. Another rubs her feet with cooled ash, murmuring what sounds like a protective rhyme. Her gaze remains fixed on the horizon, where the last sliver of the moon hangs stubbornly above the pale skyline. Historians still argue whether these rules were theological, astrological, or cultural. Zoroastrian texts are cryptic at best, some referencing unclean days as symbolic, others presenting rigid instructions. What's clear is that many women respected these rhythms as empowering, not punitive. The moon takes us away, one young mother explains, so we can return brighter. During these off days, women avoided communal baths. Instead, they used dry herbs oils and what some referred to as quiet cleansing, a method of sitting in solitude wrapped in cedar-scented cloth, allowing the body's rhythms to align with the skies. You glimpse a young girl nestled under a canopy of linen sheets, chewing a petal of clove and rocking gently to herself. She's not unwell. She's moon-sheltered. There are also practical tools. Linen pads stuffed with moss and camphor, worn with belts stitched in spiral patterns to encourage downward harmony. You're shown a wooden box containing moonstones, each infused with frankincense and marked for specific days of the lunar calendar. This one, a woman says proudly, holding up a pale green gem, is for the waning moon. It slows my fire. You begin to understand that this wasn't a ban. It was a pause, a space carved out for slowness, reflection, and recalibration. In the bustle of Persian life, trade festivals, temple duties, these lunar intervals gave women time to themselves. No water, no noise, just scent, breath, and sky. One grandmother tells you a story of her first moon retreat when she was 13. She wasn't scared. She was brought saffron rice, wrapped in silk, and told to rest like a mountain. That night, she claims her dreams were so vivid. She saw her own future. Whether you believe her or not, it's clear the experience was sacred. You pass by a bathhouse entrance now. Outside, two girls sit cross-legged, grinding seeds and petals into paste. They won't enter today because of the waxing crescent. Instead, they're preparing foot balm for tomorrow, when they'll be clear to receive water again. A man walks by and nods respectfully, not in dismissal, but in quiet acknowledgement. You get the sense that these rituals, while rarely discussed openly, were woven deeply into community rhythms. You think back to the rigid bathhouse rules, the ceremonial shavings, the scented temples. So much of Persian hygiene is about discipline, structure, action. And yet, here's a system built on not acting, on waiting, on letting the body be. As the women begin to hum a tune that follows the moon's arc across the sky, you close your eyes. The scent of dried myrrh lingers in the air. No soap, no water, but still cleansing. You've returned to the city now, and the streets are bustling with merchants, musicians, and the scent of spiced lentils wafting from food stalls. But your destination isn't the marketplace, it's a rooftop. More specifically, the shaded corner of a high terrace where an older gentleman sits cross-legged beside a spread of freshly folded turbans. Today's lesson, head hygiene. It begins oddly enough with a bowl of oil. The man gestures for you to sit and begins rubbing his palms with a mixture of almond oil, myrrh, and crushed mint. He dabs a small amount on your temples, murmuring something about head serenity. Then, with a surprising amount of formality, he unwraps your turban, revealing your rather sweat-slicked hair, and raises a bushy eyebrow. You've been wearing this like a curtain, he says, not a crown. You smile sheepishly. He does not smile back. Turban hygiene in ancient Persia wasn't merely a matter of fabric and fashion. It was intimately tied to cleanliness, class, and even cosmic harmony. The turban, worn by men of status, scholarship, or piety, had rules both about how it was wrapped and what lay beneath it. You're handed a wooden comb carved with tiny prayers along its edge. As you begin working through your scalp, he explains, clean thoughts rise from clean crowns. If your head is cluttered with oil and dust, your ideas will stumble. The combing is done in one direction, only front to back, mirroring the flow of light, or so you're told. Then comes the cleansing powder, a mix of dried neem leaves, salt, and rose petal ash. You rub it into your scalp like dry shampoo. It tingles. It smells faintly of lemon and earth, and it's surprisingly effective. Historians still argue how standardized these turban-related practices were. Some say they were enforced strictly among the elite, especially priests and scribes. Others believe they were more symbolic guidelines rather than laws. But the man in front of you clearly believes every gesture matters. Next, he opens a box lined with silk. Inside are strips of cloth dyed with indigo and turmeric. He selects one, breathes into it, and begins to wrap it around your head with astonishing speed. The layers fall precisely, each fold pressing gently against the last. After the third wrap, he pauses and tucks in a sprig of mint. For clarity, he says simply, it's not just about keeping the head clean. It's about protecting what's in the head. The turban was seen as a kind of mental filter, shielding the mind from chaos, impurity, or outside influence. During festivals, men might switch to lighter fabrics, silk instead of cotton, and apply a dab of rose oil to the inner fold, so that every thought was greeted with sweetness. You're told some priests even slept in light turbans to catch dreams before they fled. One noble family reportedly passed down a ritual where the eldest son's turban had to be washed in moonlight before his wedding. Keeps the mind from wandering, they claimed. There were even days when removing the turban was forbidden, especially during eclipses, thunderstorms, or national mourning. To uncover your head in disorder is to invite disorder in your guide, explains tightening the final knot. You're suddenly aware of how your head feels lighter, somehow, and cooler beneath the carefully arranged layers. The mint tucked near your ear releases its scent gradually, like a slow whisper of calm. Just then, a young boy climbs the rooftop stairs, carrying a copper bowl. Inside is a folded turban, water-soaked and wrinkled. The man gabs. He didn't dry it. He hisses. A wet turban is a wet brain. He turns to you. Would you wear damp thoughts on your head? You shake your head vigorously. Absolutely not. Later, you pass through a shaded alley where women are tending to scalp care of their own braiding scented threads into their hair, massaging aloe sap into their partings. One explains that her grandmother used to sleep with dried basil tucked into her pillow to chase bad dreams out through the crown. You nod. Somehow it makes sense. As the sun dips behind the city walls, you sit for a moment in your fresh turban, the folds just tight enough to hold shape the mint doing its quiet work. You've bathed without water, scented without perfume, and now wrapped your very thoughts in cloth. Maybe that's the true core of Persian hygiene. It was never just about bodies. It was about intentions, about designing a world where even your scalp is treated like sacred ground. You're easing into the warmest part of the day now, and the city hums like a sleepy beehive. Sunlight pours through latticed windows, and a faint breeze carries hints of coriander sweat and soap. You're led by your host, a retired spice merchant with surprisingly soft hands, into a domed building that smells like 10 kinds of citrus. Welcome to the hammam, the Persian public bathhouse. Despite all the rules and rituals of private grooming, Persians valued communal bathing deeply. These bathhouses were everywhere, from provincial villages to sprawling capitals, serving as cleansing centers, social lounges, and occasionally low-key matchmaking venues. The first thing you notice: the quiet. It's not silent, but voices here don't rise above murmurs. Every splash feels intentional, almost rehearsed. You're instructed to disrobe in a small changing chamber. Wrap yourself in a linen cloth and step through a series of doors, each one slightly warmer than the last. The heat isn't overwhelming, just enough to loosen your limbs. You're already sweating before you sit down. A man nearby, bald as a polished nut and wrapped in eucalyptus-scented steam, nods and says, "This is where the dirt leaves and the dignity returns." Your host hands you a small clay ball. It looks like a truffle, but smells like soap. Inside, a paste made from fenugreek tamarind, pulp, and powdered sandalwood. You rub it between your palms, and it begins to foam gently. Not like a modern shampoo, more like a whisper of bubbles. As you begin scrubbing, you're introduced to the bathhouse's unwritten rules. Never pour water on someone without warning. Don't splash too loudly. Don't sit in someone else's steam path. You might not see the path, but apparently everyone feels it. The water system is also unique. There's no single pool, just large basins filled from rooftop cisterns. Cold water on the left, hot on the right. You're told to balance them like a poem, pouring equal measures over yourself as you go. One man offers a ladle. Another raises an eyebrow, silently warning you not to touch the ladle handle with wet fingers. Why? Because the gods don't like smudges, someone whispers. Historians still debate whether these practices were codified or just passed down through habit. Some accounts claim there were hammam inspectors, elders who monitored etiquette and corrected errors with polite, pointed coughing. Others believe the bathhouse was self-regulating, like a murmuring flock of birds. Either way, you adapt. You sit. You scrub. You rinse. You hum. At one point, you're offered a scalp massage. The man's hands are like warm river stones. He uses an herbal oil that smells of licorice and lemon bark, muttering blessings in a language you barely catch. Your thoughts slow to a crawl. You feel like a teacup being refilled. And yet, beneath all this calm, there's hierarchy. The merchant class bathes in one corner, priests in another. The most elite have their own rooms, small tiled chambers with separate fires and dedicated towel boys. You're reminded again that even here, status has scent. Your host points to a nearby nobleman who's receiving a full-body clay wrap. He uses white clay from the Caspian coast, he says. We use the garden stuff. No one complains. Everyone knows their soap. Then come the perfumes. As the bathing ends, men retreat into the cooling room, where they lie on stone benches and press small, scented cloths to their chests. One man smokes a thin, sweet-scented pipe. Another passes around dried oranges, pierced with clove buds, like miniature incense bombs. You're handed a towel, sun-warmed faintly, saffron-stained, and patted dry by a cheerful attendant who sings under his breath. He offers you a spritz of musk water. You decline. He sprays you anyway. Before you leave, there's one last ritual, an anointing of the souls. Your feet are dried with rosemary leaves and gently massaged with almond oil. It's said this anchors your spirit after such deep cleansing, keeping it from drifting off into dreams before your body catches up. You wiggle your toes. They feel like they belong to a much more important person. As you step back into the sunlight, the street noise feels louder, harsher. The world is messier outside these stone walls. But you feel like a cleaned manuscript, delicately restored, edge to edge. You look back at the hammam. A new line is forming. Buckets clink. Steam curls into the sky. Inside, they will clean again. You're walking through a narrow alley, now behind a row of saffron vendors and jugglers, following the unmistakable smell of something earthy, spicy, slightly smoky, and definitely human. Nature calls loudly, and fortunately, your host grins and leads you to a squat, unassuming brick building with a curtain for a door. Welcome to the Persian lavatory. Yes, even bathroom rituals in ancient Persia were governed by hygiene codes that went far beyond flush and wash. Here, relief was not just a bodily function. It was a spiritual event with rules, tools, and a faint air of philosophy. You enter and see a row of simple, squat-style pits, each surrounded by meticulously swept tiles. A servant with a jug of lime powder bows slightly and gestures to a nearby stall. "No left foot first," he says gently but firmly. "Enter with the right. Always." You do as instructed. Inside, there's no toilet paper, of course, but a ceramic bowl filled with smooth pebbles ash and a pale liquid that smells faintly of lemon and vinegar. This is sandabe, a traditional cleansing mixture made from lime powder water and astringent herbs. It was used to deodorize, sanitize, and spiritually purify, often all at once. Once finished, you reach for the small bronze ladle and pour a modest amount over your hands and lower legs. Soap is optional if available, but the real secret weapon here is friction and intent. One priest's guidebook even advised reciting a purification verse with each rinse, lest the filth cling to your shadow. Outside the stall, a small trough of water flows constantly, fed by a cistern on the roof. You're told this is to prevent nasu, the spiritual pollution that could arise from still reused water. Running water is righteous, your host quips, handing you a towel stitched with the image of a flame. It carries impurity away before it can gossip. Historians still debate whether Persian toilets had consistent plumbing or relied more on clever drainage. In wealthier homes, some lavatories emptied into underground clay channels lined with limestone to neutralize odor and bacteria. In poorer areas, people used lime pits and buried ash to deodorize the waste. And yes, aromatics were involved. Every lavatory you visit includes a small bowl of incense, usually frankincense or myrrh, burned just outside the door. It's not just for covering up smells. The smoke was believed to act as a spiritual barrier, ensuring that no impurities clung to passers-by. In one bathhouse, you notice an inscription on the wall that reads, "Smells rise. Spirits notice." Then come the little luxuries. One elderly woman offers you a hand wipe of mulberry paper soaked in rose water. Another insists you chew on a clove before rejoining the street. "Mouth, body, and spirit," she says, tapping your chin. They must agree before you speak again. Even graffiti in Persian lavatories leaned toward the philosophical. On one latrine wall, someone's carved, "In here we are equal. From king to beggar, we all return to dust and hopefully lime powder." You chuckle. Your host nods, reading it aloud, as if quoting scripture. Then the final touch ritual, hand scenting. A boy with a brass tray walks through the courtyard, offering small cloths dabbed in orange blossom oil. You're told to press one to your palms and inhale to remind your hands they are more than what they've done, the boy says, far too wise for his age. It all seems excessive until you realize something. You feel balanced. There's no shame in these acts, no rush, no muttered apologies. The lavatory isn't a hidden corner of life. It's just another station on the path to cleanliness, a brief return to humility, and a literal fresh start. As you leave the building, your sandals tapping softly on the swept floor, you pass a man entering with a book under his arm. He nods, smiles, and says, "Best place for thinking." You smile back, knowing exactly what he means. Night is falling now, but the day isn't quite done. A hush settles over the city, thick as incense, as temple bells echo softly from somewhere behind the hills. Your host taps your arm and gestures toward a narrow stone path lined with glowing oil lamps. "Time for the final cleansing," he says. "It's the one we all pretend not to need." You follow him past a crumbling garden wall into a quiet courtyard surrounded by pale clay walls. The air is heavy with the scent of camphor and something else, an unmistakable metallic tang you can't place at first. Then you see them, a small group of men in white robes, their heads covered, their hands gloved in thick linen, gathered around a circular platform made of polished stone. At the center, a set of tools, a fire basin, and a basin of sand. You've arrived at the funerary cleansing grounds. And though no body lies here now, the rituals are ever present, because in ancient Persia, death wasn't a break in hygiene, but its final and most urgent test. In Zoroastrian belief, the dead body, nasa, becomes immediately impure the moment life departs. It's no longer animated by the soul's sacred fire, and as such, it becomes dangerously pollutive, not just to others, but to water, to earth, even to words. And so, the cleansers, a special caste of death priests known as Nasu Salayars, were trained in the delicate, almost surgical art of not touching. You watch as one man demonstrates the procedure using a sack of flour as a stand-in for the deceased. He handles it with a pair of tongs carved from tamarisk wood, lifting it with slow, reverent movements. His partner sprinkles powdered ash in a circle around the sack, murmuring protective prayers. Nothing, not even a footprint, crosses the line. Then the cleansing begins, not of the body, but of themselves. Yes, these men wash their own hands again and again before, during, and after contact with the body, with ashes, with cow's urine, with water infused with pomegranate rind and myrtle leaves. One uses a curved metal rod to scratch behind his ear, only to wash again after. The filth is patient, your host whispers. You must be more so. Historians still argue whether these intense rites were practical or symbolic. Some claim the Persians feared disease from corpses, so they layered myth over sanitation. Others insist it was entirely spiritual proof that death, like dirt, needed careful boundaries. You're shown a set of cleansing stones used to purify hands without water. Rubbed briskly together, they produce a powdery grit that absorbs oils and neutralizes spiritual residue. One stone is etched with the symbol of a bird, the vulture sacred to the sky burial ritual. You're told that bodies were placed atop Dakma's towers of silence, where scavenging birds returned them to the sky. But again, the emphasis wasn't on the dead. It was on the living who remained behind. The priests must cleanse thoroughly or be barred from temple service for 30 days. Even the tools they used were buried or burned. Nearby, a teenage boy polishes a set of fire tongs with lemon ash and goat tallow. He's training, your host says. It takes 7 years before he'll touch a death tool directly. You glance around and realize this courtyard, for all its gravity, is spotless. There's no visible soot, no odor, not a trace of blood or decay. Only purity, only ritual. As the demonstration ends, you're invited to participate in a symbolic cleansing. You wash your hands in 3 substances: ash vinegar and water scented with orange blossom. 1 for the body, 1 for the spirit, 1 for the world. It feels unnecessary and also oddly right. You recall the earlier bathhouse, the sandalwood scalp oil, the mint behind your ear, the dry sand scrub in the desert. And now this, a cleanliness not for beauty, but for boundaries. To say, this ends here. This does not follow me home. Before leaving, you're handed a small pouch of ash mixed with rose petal powder. Carry it, one of the priests says. It reminds the fingers not to forget. You nod. And as you walk out under the now star-speckled sky, the city seems different. You've cleansed the living. You've honored the dead. And somewhere in between, your soul feels just maybe washed too. The night deepens, and the wind shifts, carrying with it the sound of soft chanting and the sweet, heady scent of rosewater. You find yourself in a temple courtyard again. But this one is different. It's smaller, quieter, less of a public space, more of a hidden sanctuary. A priest in shimmering white robes approaches, holding something unexpected. A mop. You almost laugh, but then he kneels before a simple statue carved from dark stone and begins to clean slowly and with astonishing care. Welcome to a deeply underappreciated ritual, the hygiene of the divine. In ancient Persia, cleaning idols wasn't symbolic. It was mandatory. The gods, after all, were not above a little dust. And Persian priests, they were divine janitors, working with schedules more precise than a royal calendar. You watch as the priest dabs the statue's hands with a cotton cloth soaked in distilled rosewater. Each movement is circular, always clockwise, never rushed. He murmurs a phrase with every pass, and you can't help but wonder, was this written somewhere? Memorized? Improvised? Your host leans in. There are 99 steps to this ritual. Miss one, and it resets. You're not sure if he's joking. Next comes a brushing, an impossibly delicate broom made of woven reeds used to clear away invisible particles of dust from the god's shoulders and neck. The brush is never used twice without being rinsed, not because the statue minds, but because the ritual does. In Zoroastrian practice, impurity isn't about offense. It's about imbalance. The idea that a single speck of negligence could invite disorder into the world. Historians still debate whether every shrine used the full 99 steps, or if this number was an ideal rather than a standard. Some texts mention abbreviated rites for travel altars, suggesting that the gods were occasionally okay with a gentle wipe down when on the go. But for permanent temples, like this one, full protocol. And it's not just wiping. Every part of the cleansing involves intentional scent. The priest switches oils at precise moments. Lemon for the base jasmine, for the arms, frankincense for the forehead. Each scent corresponds to an element or virtue. Lemon purifies. Jasmine calms. Frankincense dignifies. You're invited to help with the anointing, but only after washing your hands 3 times and stepping backward into the temple, not forward. You enter humility first, your host whispers. You press a droplet of oil to the statue's foot. It's cool slick and oddly humbling. Not because the stone reacts, but because you do. You feel the weight of generations before you, each one repeating this same silent act. The final stage involves dusting the platform beneath the idol with powdered saffron and crushed bay leaf. The priest scatters it in a spiral pattern, like raking sand in a Zen garden. This is not decoration, he says. It reminds the air that holiness has a shape. Once the cleansing is done, the tools are gathered, rinsed in spring water, and placed in a carved stone box labeled only with a symbol of flame. The mop hung with care on a rack outside the shrine to dry in the morning sun. Even mops, it seems, deserve ritual respect. You step outside and take a breath. The scent of frankincense clings to your clothes. A child runs past, holding a bundle of temple cloths to be laundered. Behind him, an old man refills a lantern, pausing first to wash the glass with lemon ash. You think of all the places you've washed today. Your hands, your scalp, your breath, even your thoughts. And now you've helped clean something that cannot move, cannot speak, and yet in this moment felt more alive than anything else. Cleansing you, realize, is never really for the thing being cleaned. It's for the one doing the cleaning. The courtyard is behind you now, and the quiet city hums with lantern light and half-closed shutters. You wander into a smaller square, a stone bench here, a sleeping cat there, a breeze that smells faintly of cinnamon and lamp oil. Then you hear it, a mild but animated conversation drifting through a nearby open window. You creep closer. Inside, by the flickering glow of a single lamp, 2 men sit cross-legged, with a parchment scroll between them. One wears a scholar's cap. The other waves a finger emphatically. They are arguing about an itch. More precisely, whether scratching one's arm during a ritual fast breaks the vow of purity. You've stumbled into the quieter corners of Persian hygiene, the realm of philosophy, law, and technicality. Not every practice was about soap or oil. Some of it lived in ink and debate in the strange, fascinating gray zones where faith logic and bodily reflex collided. One man insists that scratching without drawing blood is no different than breathing. It's unconscious and thus innocent. The other counters that intent matters, and if one meant to scratch, it could be a lapse in discipline. Is restraint not the foundation of ritual? He asks, tugging thoughtfully at his own beard. You sit nearby, pretending to read a nearby tile inscription while listening. The scroll between them appears to be a list of minor ritual infractions, ranked, categorized, and annotated. One footnote reads, "If one sneezes while reciting sacred verse, repeat only if the sneeze began with a frown." You blink. This is extensive, but it makes sense. In a culture where cleansing was a form of communication with the divine, even small interruptions mattered. A stray cough, a sudden itch, a wandering thought. Persian theologians weren't just worried about dirt. They were worried about disruption. Historians still debate whether these legalistic concerns were widely enforced or reserved for temple scholars. Some claim the average person followed simpler rules, while elite circles obsessed over minutiae. Still, texts like the Vendidad are full of examples, guidelines for how long to pause between rinses, how much breath to exhale during ablutions, and even the angle of respectful fingernail trimming. In fact, one of the scholars now moves on to a new topic: whether rinsing the mouth twice before prayer, rather than once as prescribed, is a display of devotion or a deviation. Is more always better? He asks, raising an eyebrow. His companion shrugs, then rubs his nose. Only if the intent is clean. You can't help but smile. Here even a debate about water is steeped in warmth. Then suddenly, both scholars freeze. A tiny beetle is crawling across the scroll. One carefully lifts it with the end of a reed pen and sets it down outside the window. Why? Because that scroll was blessed earlier that day, and killing a beetle on its surface would have required a re-cleansing, not of the paper, but of the room. Your host appears beside you now, holding 2 cups of warm milk infused with honey and cardamom. They'll be at this for hours, he says, handing you a cup. Last week, They argued about whether hiccups count as bodily interruptions. You sip slowly. The milk is sweet, the night soft around you. There's something reassuring about these arguments, not aggressive, but precise. Not panicked, but playful. In a world that feels chaotic, these men search for order in the tiniest gestures. How you step, how you rinse, how you resist scratching when it itches. And maybe, just maybe, that's what hygiene was really about for the Persians. Not perfection, but awareness, a form of gentle resistance against disorder, one motion at a time. The scholars begin laughing now, something about someone who once sneezed so loudly during a funeral ritual that the casket was dropped. You can't catch every word, but it doesn't matter. The warmth is in the tone, not the translation. And so you lean back, warmed by honey milk and moonlight, thinking not about soap or oil or rules, but about the strange peace of a life lived mindfully, even in the tiniest, itchiest moments. It's your final morning in Persia, and the sun rises gently over tiled roofs and sleepy courtyards. The city is quieter now, like it knows you're nearing the end of your journey. But there's still one more ritual waiting for you, one that requires no comb, no oil, no herbs. You're led into a humble home nestled at the edge of town, where the breeze smells of bread and boiled jasmine. The room is dim, filled with warmth, and something else. Reverence. A woman in pale silk nods silently and places a folded garment into your hands. It's soft, heavier than it looks, fragrant with rose saffron and the faintest touch of cedar. You're holding a burial garment. No, don't worry. You're not being buried. Not literally. But today you're learning about the Persian tradition of the afterlife. Wash a cleansing for the future self. One final act of devotion performed in preparation not for tomorrow, but for forever. In ancient Persian culture, the preparation of the body for death began long before death itself. Once a year, usually on the first day of spring, families gathered to ritually wash oil and scent the garments they hoped to be buried in. The practice wasn't morbid. It was peaceful. It reminded everyone of the cycle and of how one should always be ready to meet eternity, smelling faintly of sandalwood. You sit cross-legged now as a basin of warm water is placed in front of you, a mixture of saffron threads. Lime and dried basil floats lazily on the surface. You dip a cloth into the bowl and gently wipe your forearms, then your feet, moving slowly, thoughtfully. No rushing, no scrubbing. This isn't about removal. It's about arrival. The silk robe you're given to wear is not ornate, no gold thread, no royal dye. It's cream-colored plain and soothing to the touch. You wrap it around yourself, and immediately your breathing slows. Historians have written about these robes, called sudra, in some regions, each one blessed, folded with intention, and stored in cedar chests lined with crushed myrtle leaves. They were never worn twice. Once used, they were returned to the earth with the wearer. But some believed the afterlife began before death, that if your soul was ready, every day was already part of your eternity. We wash, one poet wrote, not because we are dirty, but because we are returning. A woman kneels beside you and gently dabs your forehead with a cloth soaked in camphor and rose. This is how we anoint the dreams, she says, so they don't scatter on the wind. You lie back on a mat while she fans you with a bundle of bay leaves. The air is sweet. The rustle is rhythmic. You feel something shift, not in your body, but in your awareness. The feeling of being clean enough to be still. You're given one last item, a silk sachet filled with dried orange blossom and powdered iris root. Keep it with you, they tell you. Wherever you sleep next, let it remind your breath that it once knew peace. And that's when the final wind down begins. Now the lights have dimmed. The city has gone still. You're lying beneath soft linen, the scent of iris drifting faintly beside you. Your arms are loose, your breathing steady. The last of the cleansing water has dried on your skin. There's nothing left to do. No rituals to finish, no rules to remember. Just the quiet knowledge that for this one night, your body was treated not as a burden to scrub or disguise, but as something sacred, something worth the oil, the herbs, the chants, something worth carrying gently like a bowl of morning water. The stars outside hang low and flickering. Maybe they watched the same rituals centuries ago. Maybe they remember the scent of sandalwood, the soft scrape of walnut bark, the hush of a prayer whispered over ash. And maybe, just maybe, your soul is a little lighter now, shimmering quietly beneath the folds of silk and sleep. So let yourself drift. Let the layers fall away. Let the silence wrap around you like a clean robe stitched with calm and scented with patience. You are not unfinished. You are not unwashed. You are exactly where you should be. Clean, quiet, whole,